The dust motes danced in the slanted afternoon light, catching the gold of the sun as it streamed through the open barn doors. It was the smell I'd chased for 25 years, through deployments in arid landscapes and tours in concrete jungles, a rich, earthy perfume of hay, old leather, and the sweet, warm scent of a happy animal. My daughter, Maya, her 10-year-old frame a study in concentration, meticulously brushed the dappled flank of her pony, Stardust. Her humming was slightly off-key, a little melody of pure contentment that settled deep in my chest and anchored me to this place, to this new life. This was it. This was the peace I had purchased with a career's worth of noise, stress, and a world painted in shades of khaki and gray. Our 50 acres of rolling hills, which Maya had christened Quiet Haven Ranch, was supposed to be the epilogue to a long and complicated story. A place where the only orders I followed were the changing of the seasons, and the only conflicts were with stubborn fence posts and the occasional groundhog. We had been here for 3 months, and the rhythms of this new existence were finally taking hold. That evening, after a dinner of simple grilled chicken and vegetables from a local farm stand, I sat at the heavy oak dining table that had come with the house. While Maya sketched horses in a notebook, I decided to finally tackle the ridiculously thick binder that had been presented to me at closing. The Amber Creek Estates Homeowners Association covenants, conditions, and restrictions. 300 pages of single-spaced rules, a document designed to intimidate rather than inform. I flipped through, my eyes, trained to scan dense regulatory documents, picking out keywords. "Look at this, sweetie," I said, a chuckle in my voice. I read a line aloud. Article 2, Section 1. All properties shall be maintained in a manner that preserves and enhances the essential rural and agricultural character of the community. Maya looked up from her drawing, her brow furrowed. "What's agricultural character, Dad?" "It means it's supposed to look like a farm," I explained, tapping the page. "And that makes sense. The realtor told us this whole area is part of the Green Valley Agricultural Preserve. The county wants it to stay looking natural, not like a typical suburb." But then, I flipped forward a dozen pages. You get to Article 4, and there are 12 pages on approved varieties of lawn grass and the mandatory spacing of ornamental shrubs. It kind of contradicts itself, doesn't it? Look like a farm, but please, no messy farm-looking things. I dismissed it as boilerplate legalese, the kind of thing lawyers write to cover all possible bases, without considering if they make logical sense together. It was a small, logical inconsistency that my brain flagged and filed away out of habit, a loose thread in a massive tapestry. I closed the binder, the scent of its vinyl cover a poor substitute for the honest smell of the barn. My mission was peace, not picking apart bylaws. Operation Enduring Serenity was, for all intents and purposes, underway. The crunch of tires on the gravel driveway the next afternoon was an alien sound in our symphony of quiet. It was too sharp, too aggressive, the sound of a vehicle arriving with a purpose, not for a visit. I felt an old, familiar prickle of situational awareness tingle at the base of my neck, a habit I couldn't shake. I put down the bridle I was mending and stepped out of the barn, my eyes squinting into the glare of the westering sun. A gleaming white SUV, so clean it seemed to repel the dust of our road, was parked at an angle that felt intentionally domineering. Its front tires halfway onto the new grass, I was patiently coaxing to life. The driver's side door opened, and a woman emerged. She was a perfect caricature of suburban authority. Her blonde hair was shellacked into an immovable helmet that defied the gentle breeze. She wore a crisp, pink polo shirt tucked into white capri pants that were blindingly clean, an outfit utterly unsuited for a working ranch. In one hand, she held a clipboard like a scepter, her pen poised for action. She didn't walk towards me. She advanced, her stride short and purposeful, as if she were inspecting troops. "Are you the new owner?" Her voice was high and tight, each word clipped with an air of practiced impatience that set my teeth on edge. I wiped my hands on my jeans, a gesture of peace, and offered a neighborly smile. "Daniel Miller, and you are—" "Brenda McIntyre," she announced, the name delivered as if it should be accompanied by a drum roll and a salute. "I'm the president of the Amber Creek Estates Homeowners Association." "Nice to meet you, Brenda," I said, extending a hand. My father had taught me a man's handshake was his bond. She ignored it completely, her gaze already conducting a critical sweep of my property. Her eyes, small and judgmental, scanned the neatly stacked firewood, the freshly painted barn, Maya's small but thriving vegetable garden, and finally landed with accusatory force on my mailbox at the end of the driveway. It was a sturdy, standard-issue black mailbox, sitting atop a solid 4x4 post I had just installed and stained a pleasant, rustic cedar brown. "Your mailbox post," she said, tapping her pen against her clipboard with a sharp click, click, click. "It's in violation." I blinked, genuinely confused. "The post. It's brand new. Solid cedar." Section 4, subsection C, paragraph 2 of the Amber Creek Covenants. She recited from memory. A chilling and frankly pathetic party trick. All mailbox posts must be painted heritage white, semi-gloss finish, to maintain community uniformity and aesthetic appeal. Yours is brown. She said the word brown as if it were a particularly vile profanity, something one might scrape off the bottom of a shoe. The contradiction I'd read just last night came immediately to mind. I thought the official goal was agricultural character, I asked mildly, still trying to keep the peace. Most farm posts I've seen are either natural wood or have been there so long the paint's worn off. A flicker of pure annoyance crossed her face, a brief crack in the porcelain mask of absolute authority. She was not used to being questioned, however gently. "The bylaws ensure a tasteful and uniform interpretation of that character," she snapped, her tone leaving no room for debate. "Taste is not subjective here. Mr. Miller, it's codified. I'll issue a formal written warning. You have 7 days to rectify the violation. After that, a fine of $50 per day will be levied." She made a sharp, decisive checkmark on a form on her clipboard. Her gaze then drifted to the barn, her disapproval almost a physical force. "I also notice your barn roof is a metal composite. The approved roofing materials for all outbuildings are architectural shingles or Spanish tile." "The barn was here when I bought the property," I said, my smile now feeling tight and artificial. "It's on the survey and in the sales documents. It's a pre-existing, non-conforming structure, grandfathered in." I knew my terms. I had spent a career dealing with contracts and regulations far more complex than this, often in languages I didn't speak fluently. "We'll see what the HOA's legal counsel says about pre-existing structures of a non-conforming nature," she countered, though a hint of uncertainty entered her eyes. "I'll be in touch." Without another word, she turned on her heel, her sensible white sneakers crunching on my gravel with what sounded like self-righteous indignation. She climbed back into her pristine SUV and reversed with a startling lack of care, her tires spitting stones onto the lawn. As the SUV pulled away, a flash of sunlight glinted off the corner of the rear window. It was the peeling edge of a sticker, the kind a towing company uses. For a fleeting moment, my eyes, trained to catch small details, thought they could make out the words "notice of repossession" before the vehicle turned and vanished down the road. It was another small, incongruous detail. A pristine, expensive vehicle with a repo notice. I filed it away. Maya came out of the barn, leading Stardust by the reins, her face a mask of concern. "Who was that lady?" "Dad?" she asked, her voice small. I forced the smile back onto my face, not wanting to taint her peace. "Just one of the neighbors. Sweetie," I said, reaching out to ruffle her hair. The official welcome wagon. Maya looked at the angry tire tracks on the grass, then back at me, her eyes far too perceptive for a 10-year-old. She didn't sound very welcoming. "No," I thought, as I watched the dust settle in the driveway. She didn't sound welcoming at all. The official warning arrived 2 days later, a crisp, intimidating envelope in the now infamous mailbox. It was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive legalese, citing the bylaw about the Heritage White Post, and giving me a compliance deadline of the following Tuesday. It was absurd, a ridiculous hill to die on, and my primary objective remained peace. That Saturday, Maya and I made a trip to the hardware store. "I still don't get why it has to be white," Maya grumbled as we stood in the paint aisle, staring at a bewildering array of white swatches. Heritage white, antique white, dove white. They're all just white. The brown looked nice. It looked like a tree. "The rules say it has to be white to match everyone else's," I explained, trying to frame it as a lesson in community living rather than submission to a petty tyrant. Sometimes, when you're part of a group, you agree to do things a certain way to keep everything looking neat. "That sounds boring," she declared. I couldn't help but agree. We finished the job. The post was a gleaming, sterile white, looking completely out of place next to our rustic wooden fence. It stuck out like a sore thumb, a monument to Brenda's authority. But it was done. I took a photo, timestamped it, and emailed it to the generic HOA address, noting that violation Jur MB 1138 was now rectified. I was methodical. I documented everything. My hope that this would be the end of it was profoundly naive. The following week, another envelope appeared. I opened it with a sense of dread. It was a fine, $100. The reason, violation of Section 4, subsection C, paragraph 2, incorrect finish on mailbox post. My blood ran cold. I had specifically, painstakingly, purchased semi-gloss. I still had the can in the garage. The letter continued. A visual inspection on Wednesday confirmed the use of a high-gloss finish, which creates an unacceptable level of sun glare and detracts from the community's rustic aesthetic. It was a lie. A bald-faced, deliberate, and frankly, insulting lie. I walked out to the driveway and stared at the post. The semi-gloss finish was exactly what it was supposed to be. A soft sheen, not a mirror-like glare. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was a power play. My attempts at peaceful compliance had been interpreted as weakness. I wrote a polite, factual email contesting the fine, attaching a photo of the paint can with the semi-gloss label clearly visible. I received no reply. The fines kept coming. A notice for unmanaged weed growth along the primary property frontage. The weeds were a beautiful patch of black-eyed Susans and wild asters that the bees and butterflies adored. As I stood by the fence line with the mower, feeling like a vandal, an old pickup truck slowed and pulled over. An older man with a deeply lined face and work-worn hands got out. "Name's Abernathy," he said, nodding. "Lived here 30 years. Shame to see you cutting those." "Old man Hemlock who sold this land to the developer." He would be spinning in his grave. The whole point of that preserve variance the county gave us was to keep this place looking wild, to stop it from becoming another cookie-cutter suburb. He squinted towards the road. Brenda's trying to turn it into a golf course. She wasn't always like this, you know. After her husband left and her kids went off to college, well, she started needing to control something. And this HOA is the only thing she has left. He shook his head sadly and drove off, leaving me with a critical piece of the puzzle: the word variance, a legal term, a specific agreement. With each letter from Brenda, my documentation grew more detailed. My polite letters were ignored. The monthly statements showed a balance due that was growing into the thousands. It was time for a new strategy. I spent an entire evening rereading the HOA covenant. This time, not as a homeowner, but as an analyst. I highlighted every ambiguous phrase, every potential loophole, every clause that contradicted the agricultural character mandate. The fines, I discovered, had to be approved by the three-person Architectural Control Committee: Brenda, a Mr. Henderson, and a Mrs. Gable. I decided to try diplomacy. It was a spectacular failure. Mr. Henderson, a man I found trimming his immaculate rose bushes, was weary. "Look, son, I just sign what she puts in front of me," he admitted, his eyes full of a quiet shame. "Brenda, she organized a meal train for my wife for a month straight when she was going through chemo last year. She can be a good neighbor, but she can also make things difficult. It's just easier than arguing with her." Mrs. Gable was even more direct in her fear. Speaking through a crack in her front door, clutching a yapping dog, she whispered, "She had the last family who challenged her audited by the IRS. A coincidence," she said. "My husband and I have a small online business. We can't risk that kind of attention." It was then I understood. Brenda ruled through a combination of weaponized favors and sheer intimidation. She had insulated herself perfectly. My compliance hadn't worked. My logic had been ignored. And my appeals to her co-conspirators had been rebuffed. That night, I installed a new set of military-grade security cameras, 4 of them, with night vision, motion detection, and cloud storage. The mission had changed: establish a perimeter, gather intelligence, and prepare for an escalation. The first act of direct aggression came a week later. 2 long, deep gouges raked down the side of the white post. The camera footage showed a white SUV, late at night. The next incident was far more sinister. I found the retaining pin on the pasture gate missing. The heavy bolt was loosened just enough that a good shove from Stardust could have worked it open, sending him onto a road known for speeding trucks. A chill of pure dread went through me. The camera on the barn caught a partial view: a figure in a baseball cap. The same white SUV. This was a direct threat to Maya's world, to her happiness. As I was replacing the simple pin with a heavy-duty, marine-grade lock, my phone rang. It was an old number, a ghost from my past life. "Frank," I answered, the name feeling foreign on my tongue. "Dan the Colonel himself heard you swapped your spreadsheets for a pitchfork." His voice boomed. Frank and I had served together in the Corps of Engineers. He was a logistics and research genius, a man who could find a needle in a digital haystack. "Something like that," I said, my eyes scanning the fence line. "It's supposed to be quieter." "Yeah, supposed to be. Listen, Frank, I need a favor. I'm dealing with some local politics. An HOA president. Remember that base in Okinawa? The local council that tried to block our expansion with 1,000 petty violations." "Ah, a local warlord." Frank chuckled grimly. "Classic insurgency tactics. Isolate, demoralize, fabricate violations until the target gives up. Check her funding. Colonel, these little tyrants always build their castles on sand. What's the name? Brenda McIntyre. See what you can find. Public records, financials, civil suits, property liens. Build me a file. And Frank, can you pull up the original county zoning variance for a development called Amber Creek Estates? Consider it done, Frank said, his voice all business. I'll encrypt it and send it over. Brenda, emboldened by the belief her nocturnal activities went unnoticed, shifted her campaign to the court of public opinion. She used the private Amber Creek Estates Facebook group as her personal burn book. Just a friendly reminder to our newer residents that maintaining our community's aesthetic is a shared responsibility. The posts became more personal, twisting my desire for privacy into anti-social aggression. Then she posted the zoomed-in photo of Maya's treehouse. A very concerning, unpermitted structure, almost like some kind of military-style watchtower. I've received several calls from concerned parents. The comments were a cesspool. Does he have weapons in there? My kids are scared. The real-world consequences hit Maya like a physical blow. She came home from the community pond one afternoon, her eyes red-rimmed, but her chin held high. A combination of hurt and defiance that tore at my heart. The Johnson kids said I couldn't play with them, she said, her voice trembling slightly as she pulled off her muddy boots. Billy said his mom told him you were dangerous and that we were bad people who don't follow rules. What did you do, sweetie? I asked, kneeling down to her level, my heart clenching into a cold, hard knot. I told them they were wrong, she said fiercely, a tear finally escaping and tracing a clean path through the dirt on her cheek. I told them my dad was a hero and helped build things for people, and that he was the kindest person in the world, and that their moms were listening to a bully. Then I came home. She finally broke down then, sobbing in my arms, the injustice of it all overwhelming her. The rage I felt was so pure, so intense, it was almost clarifying. Brenda McIntyre had made my child cry. All lines had been crossed. That night, Maya wasn't sulking. I found her at her computer, the glow of the screen illuminating her determined face. What are you doing, honey? I asked. I'm reading the HOA rules, she said, scrolling through the PDF I had left open on my desktop. The ones you were talking about. It says here, Article 6, Section 4, that reasonable play structures for minor children are permitted. It doesn't say what kind. And it doesn't say they can't look like a castle, or a fort, or anything. She's wrong, Dad. The rules are on our side. My daughter, my quiet, horse-loving girl, was fighting back in her own way. She was looking for ammunition in the same document that was being used as a weapon against us. A surge of pride cut through my anger. We were a team. Frank's file arrived the next day. It was a comprehensive portrait of a life in collapse. A bitter divorce. Dwindling alimony set to expire in 6 months. Massive credit card debt. And a lien on her house from the county for 2 years of unpaid property taxes. The repo notice I'd glimpsed was real. The HOA presidency, with its small stipend and immense power over others, was the only thing she had left. Control was her drug, and she was a desperate addict. Her desperation led her to weaponize government authority. County code enforcement came about the bunker. The young officer took one look at the treehouse and laughed. "This is perfectly legal, sir. We're getting a lot of these nuisance calls lately from this subdivision." Animal control was next, responding to a complaint of a skeletal and neglected pony. The officer found Stardust to be a picture of health. "I'll be filing this report as unfounded and malicious," she said, clearly annoyed at the waste of her time. Then came the knock on the door that tilted the world on its axis. "Mr. Miller, my name is Carol Shaw. We're with Child Protective Services." My blood turned to ice. She had gone after my daughter. I forced myself into a state of professional calm, my training taking over. Emotional reactions were a liability. I invited them in. Let them do their job, and let them see the truth of our loving, stable home. 2 hours later, they left, apologizing profusely and promising to note the malicious nature of the false report in their official file. After they were gone, I hugged Maya for a long time. Later that evening, I saw a light on in Brenda's house across the valley. Through my binoculars, I could see her silhouette in her pristine kitchen window. She was on the phone, her posture rigid. She gestured angrily, then suddenly slumped, her shoulders shaking as she hung up. She stood there for a long time, a lonely, defeated figure in a big, empty house, before drawing the curtains. I felt a flicker of pity, the ghost of an emotion for a person so consumed by bitterness. But it was extinguished by the fresh memory of my daughter's terrified eyes. The final straw, the act that moved my mindset from defense to offense, came 3 days later. A 40-pound bag of high-nitrogen lawn fertilizer, the kind with a skull and crossbones next to the warning about livestock, lay torn open near the fence. Its granular green pellets had been spilled in a toxic trail that the next good rain would wash directly into Stardust's water trough. This was a deliberate attempt to poison my daughter's pony. The security footage was finally, irrefutably, perfect. 217 The white SUV, and this time, a motion-activated security light from my neighbor's property, illuminated her face as clearly as a portrait. Brenda McIntyre, her face twisted with a vicious, joyless malice. The direct, personal threat came 2 days after that, as if she knew she was running out of time. She marched up to me at the fence line, her face a thundercloud of fury. "You think you're clever, don't you? Making me look like a fool," she shrieked, accusing me of making the calls to the county. "This is my property, Brenda," I said quietly. "We're not going anywhere." "Oh, you think so?" she sneered, leaning over the fence. "I can make your life a living hell. Maybe your employer needs to hear about how unstable you are." Then, her eyes drifted towards Maya and Stardust in the pasture. Her lips curled into a truly ugly smile. "And that horse," she whispered, the words dripping with poison. "It would be a real shame if a gate was left open again. A real tragedy. Accidents happen all the time on these country roads. It would be devastating for a little girl to lose her pet." Time stopped. The birdsong, the breeze, the warmth of the sun, it all faded away. There was only her face, her threat hanging in the air. In that single moment, she had declared total war. I slowly lowered the post-hole digger I was holding. I straightened to my full height and let her see, for the first time, a flicker of the man I used to be. The cold, analytical officer who made decisions with permanent consequences. My face was a blank mask, my eyes as hard and flat as polished stone. I didn't say a word. I just looked at her. My silence unnerved her more than any shout could have. She saw something in my eyes she hadn't expected, a depth of resolve she couldn't comprehend. Her bravado faltered. She took an involuntary step back, stammered a final, weak warning, and practically fled down the path. The time for defense and observation was over. It was time to neutralize the threat. I spent the rest of the day and night in my office, a general planning his campaign. On my desk, lay the HOA charter, Frank's detailed file on Brenda's financial ruin, the satellite maps, and the printout of the county zoning variance. All the threads came together. The agricultural character clause Mr. Abernathy had mentioned wasn't just boilerplate. It was the entire legal foundation of the community, and Brenda had been violating it for years. Brenda called a special HOA meeting for the following Saturday. The agenda, which she emailed to the entire community with triumphant glee: emergency vote for the sanction and removal of a non-compliant and hostile resident. She was coming for my home. She had no idea I was about to dismantle her entire world. The community clubhouse buzzed with the nervous energy of a town preparing for a public spectacle. It was packed. Brenda had set the stage for a modern-day witch trial, and I was the main attraction. She stood near the podium, dressed in a severe navy blue pantsuit, looking every bit the commander-in-chief of her small kingdom. For added theatricality, she had two sheriff's deputies standing near the back of the room, a clear attempt to intimidate and lend an air of official gravity to the proceedings. She thought they were there for me. I walked in with Maya a few minutes before the meeting was scheduled to start. A hush fell over the room. Whispers followed us like a trail of smoke as I found two empty seats in the front row. I wanted a clear view. Maya clutched my hand, her knuckles white. "It's okay, sweetie," I whispered, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "Remember what we talked about: facts matter more than loud voices. Just watch." Brenda stepped up to the podium, tapping the microphone with a sharp, imperious finger. The feedback screeched, and she flinched, the first crack in her composure. "Thank you all for coming to this emergency meeting," she began, her voice regaining its familiar, condescending tone. "It is a sad day when we are forced to take such drastic measures, but the safety and integrity of our community are paramount." She launched into her PowerPoint presentation. On a large screen behind her, my life for the past 3 months was twisted into a narrative of villainy. The brown mailbox post, the patch of wildflowers, the driveway gravel, and the grand finale, the zoomed-in, sinister-looking photo of Maya's treehouse. "This man has shown a pattern of aggressive behavior," she declared, her voice ringing with false sincerity. "He has ignored warnings and fines. He has built a menacing structure that frightens our children, and I have reason to believe he is a danger to us all. That is why I have asked these deputies to be present, for our protection." Heads nodded in the audience. My neighbors. People like the Hendersons and the Gables. People too weary or too frightened to question her were buying it completely. "Therefore," she concluded, her voice rising to a crescendo, "I am calling for a vote under Article 9 of our bylaws to declare the resident at 112 Whispering Pines to be in profound and irreversible violation of the community covenants. This vote will authorize the board to place a lien on his property for the full amount of his unpaid fines, which currently stand at $4,750, and to begin legal proceedings for foreclosure and forced removal from Amber Creek Estates." The room was silent, the air thick with tension. She had played her final card. She looked directly at me, a triumphant smirk on her face. "Deputies," she said, her voice dripping with venom, "I believe this man and his child are now trespassing at a private community meeting. I want them removed from the premises immediately while we conduct our vote." The two deputies exchanged an uncertain look and started to move slowly towards me. This was the moment. I stood up slowly. I wasn't carrying a weapon or a thick binder. I held a single, slim manila folder. "If I may have a moment to respond to these baseless allegations," I said, my voice calm and clear, easily carrying through the silent room. Brenda scoffed. We've heard enough from you. You have no standing here. Actually, the older of the two deputies said, stopping, his voice polite but firm. He has a right to speak before any vote is cast. Ma'am, it's in your own bylaws. Article 3, Section 2, Right of Response. Brenda's face flushed with anger at being contradicted by her own props. But she was trapped. Fine, she snapped. 2 minutes. Then you're out. I walked to the podium. I didn't look at the crowd. I looked directly at Brenda, letting her see the calm, methodical focus in my eyes. My name is Daniel Miller, I began, my voice even and measured. And for 25 years, I was Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Miller of the United States Army Corps of Engineers. My final posting was as the Chief of Land Management and Compliance for the entire Pacific Command. My job was to oversee the acquisition, surveying, zoning compliance, environmental impact studies, and legal administration for hundreds of thousands of acres of federally controlled land. I have reviewed, and in some cases written, regulations that make your 300-page Book of Covenants look like a children's pop-up book. A murmur went through the room. I saw Mr. Henderson sit up straighter. Brenda's smirk faltered. Let's address these allegations with facts, shall we? I said, opening the folder. Exhibit A, the mailbox. Here is the receipt for the Heritage White semi-gloss paint and a sworn, notarized affidavit from a certified paint specialist confirming that the finish is, in fact, semi-gloss. Your fine for a high-gloss finish is therefore based on a falsehood, which constitutes fraud. I placed the paper on the podium. Exhibit B, the weeds. According to the County Environmental Office, the flowers you ordered me to destroy are protected native wildflower species under County Ordinance 211B, which was passed to support the Green Valley Agricultural Preserve. Destroying them carries a potential county fine of $5,000. I have photos and a copy of the ordinance. I placed another document down. The murmuring grew louder. The list goes on. The false reports to code enforcement, animal control, and most despicably, to Child Protective Services. Filing a false report with CPS is a Class B misdemeanor in this state. I have spoken with all three agencies, and they are prepared to provide testimony regarding the malicious and unfounded nature of the anonymous calls they received. Brenda was pale now, her hands gripping the side of the podium so hard her knuckles were white. But all of this, I said, my voice dropping, creating a pocket of silence in the room, is just petty harassment. The real issue here is much, much bigger. I took out the last document from my folder. It was a large, color-coded survey map. This is the original plat map and zoning variants for the Amber Creek Estates development, filed with the county in 1998. As Mr. Abernathy could tell you, and as the public record confirms, this entire area is zoned agricultural preserve. The developer was granted a special variance to build this community, but that variance was contingent on one critical, legally binding condition, that the development maintain its essential rural character and avoid excessive aesthetic uniformity that would conflict with the surrounding agricultural landscape. I let that sink in, watching the faces in the crowd as comprehension dawned. Your HOA, under Ms. McIntyre's leadership, has spent the last 5 years creating rules that do the exact opposite. Rules about a single, mandatory mailbox color. Rules about specific types of gravel. Rules that mandate manicured lawns and forbid native wildflowers. These rules are in direct violation of the foundational legal document that allows this community to even exist. Technically, every aesthetic fine, Miss McIntyre has levied for the past 5 years has been legally unenforceable. And more importantly, by systematically violating the terms of the variance, she has put the legal status of this entire subdivision and every home in it at risk. Any challenge filed with the county could result in the variance being revoked. The room was utterly silent. Jaws were literally hanging open. The residents were realizing that the woman they had empowered to protect their property values had actually been jeopardizing their very homes. And finally, I said, turning to the deputies, Brenda McIntyre is correct that you are here for a resident of this community, but you're not here for me. I pulled one last paper from my folder and handed it to the lead deputy. This is a temporary restraining order, signed by a judge this morning. It orders Brenda McIntyre to cease all contact with me and my minor daughter, pending a hearing for charges of stalking, harassment, and making credible threats against our safety and property. And this, I said, handing him a flash drive, is high-definition security footage of Ms. McIntyre trespassing on my property and attempting to poison my daughter's horse, followed by footage of her explicitly threatening to harm said horse. The county prosecutor has already seen it and is preparing charges. The deputy took the flash drive and the order. He read the order, his eyes wide. He looked at his partner. They both turned to look at Brenda. Her face had crumpled. The color was gone. She looked small and terrified and utterly defeated. The power, the authority, the entire world she had built for herself had just been publicly and systematically obliterated by cold, hard facts. Ms. McIntyre, the deputy said, his voice now cold and official. You've been served. You are to have no contact with Mr. Miller or his daughter. We need you to come with us. We have some questions for you down at the station. Brenda McIntyre, the iron-fisted ruler of Amber Creek, was speechless. She stared at me, her eyes filled with a horrified disbelief, as the deputies gently but firmly escorted her from the podium, past the stunned residents, and out of the clubhouse she had ruled for so long. The room erupted. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Brenda McIntyre's reign of terror ended not with a bang, but with the quiet, efficient machinery of the legal system she had tried so gleefully to weaponize. Faced with the undeniable video evidence and a slew of harassment charges, she accepted a plea deal. The deal included a permanent restraining order that barred her from setting foot within 500 yards of my property line, significant fines, mandatory anger management counseling, and 2 years of probation. Socially and financially, her ruin was absolute. The HOA board, facing a potential class action lawsuit from a now unified group of homeowners armed with my research into the variance violation, immediately demanded her resignation. She was voted out in absentia. The subsequent emergency audit of the HOA's finances, initiated by a newly emboldened board, revealed years of minor embezzlements and the misuse of community funds to pay for her personal legal squabbles. The bank, alerted by the legal turmoil and her existing lien for unpaid taxes, foreclosed on her house. Within 6 months, the pristine white SUV was repossessed, and Brenda was forced to sell her home at a significant loss to cover her mounting legal fees. She moved into a small, nondescript apartment complex on the other side of the county, vanishing from our lives completely. With Brenda gone, a palpable sense of relief swept through Amber Creek Estates. An emergency election was held, and Mr. Henderson, the man who had been too intimidated to help, was elected the new HOA president, a role he accepted with a newfound sense of duty. He approached me a week later, his hat literally in his hands. "Mr. Miller," he said, his voice thick with sincerity. "I want to apologize. For myself, and for the whole neighborhood. We were cowards. We let it go on for too long. Thank you for showing us we could stand up." His first act as president was to call a meeting where, with my guidance, the community voted to repeal nearly every one of Brenda's restrictive aesthetic rules. The focus shifted from punitive enforcement to genuine community building. People started planting gardens with native flowers. The heritage white mailbox posts began to disappear, replaced by a variety of styles and colors that reflected the individuality of the owners. The neighborhood began to breathe again. My life, and more importantly, Maya's life, returned to the quiet rhythm I had always sought. The neighbors were no longer strangers who averted their eyes. They were friends who would stop by to chat, to thank me, to ask for advice on their own pastures. The treehouse was completed, and it became a favorite spot for Maya and her new friends, the Johnson kids included. The cloud of anxiety that had hung over our new home had dissipated completely. One evening, as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Maya and I were out for a ride. She on Stardust, me on a gentle mare I'd recently acquired. We paused on a hilltop overlooking our land, the neatly mended fences tracing the curves of the hills, the wildflowers beginning to grow back along the road. She was a really unhappy person, wasn't she, Dad? Maya said softly, looking out at the peaceful valley. It wasn't a question asked in anger or triumph, but with a surprising note of pity, an empathy that went beyond her years. I looked at my daughter, at the strength and wisdom she had shown, and felt a wave of love so powerful it almost buckled my knees. She hadn't just endured the conflict, she had grown through it. Her heart still kind. Yes, she was sweetie, I said, a genuine, unburdened smile on my face. But we're not. This is our peace. We earned it. We defended it. We rode on, two quiet figures against a sky painted in brilliant hues of orange and purple. The mission was, finally, truly, accomplished.